Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in and thank you for your patience. I have been taking breaks between doing remote viewings. It's a really intense time I'm going to take my glasses off. Yeah, you get to see my eyes. Just because there's a glare. And yes, hello. So today I had a couple remotes. I've been taking notes for the last couple of days about various different ideas that come to me when I do my meditations, particularly when I do the heart-centered remote viewing technique. So in this remote viewing, we're talking about some really deep concepts regarding trauma. And so when I tell you this story about Lindsey Graham, it's actually using the story of Lindsey Graham as a analogy what to some extent happens to all of us. So this is a story, like we always like to say, it's a story. Imagine this happened. We're not saying it necessarily realistically did happen, but this is the story that my brain constructs when I was meditating on Lindsey Graham. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you about why this is relevant to all of us as the story goes on. So in this remote, I was focusing on Lindsey Graham, and what is coming up for Lindsey Graham appears to be that a lot of people who had signed NDAs are now threatening to come out. They have information that potentially could hurt Lindsey Graham's re-election campaign. So in this remote, as I was focusing on Lindsey Graham, I was trying to find out what incriminating evidence they had against Lindsey Graham that theoretically could harm him in the next election campaign. And as I meditated on this, I found myself focusing on photographs that had been taken of Lindsey Graham at parties. He seems to be hosting private parties. Oh, I hear July 4th. And in these parties where people are signing NDAs, he likes to dress as a lady. So there seem to be some pictures that possibly are coming out about Lindsey Graham dressing in a feminine manner. So that was what the secret was. Evidently that he was keeping, that he didn't want images or photographs from these parties coming out where he would sometimes dress as a lady. So in the remote, I tried to put myself in the shoes of Lindsey Graham, because I'm a heart-centered remote viewer. We use the empathy 5-step technique. What was it like for him growing up? How did he become the politician Lindsey Graham? Why is there such a disconnect between the politician Lindsey Graham and the authentic person who I really like, who's Lindsey Graham? And here's the story I saw. So in this story, I see Lindsey Graham. He's about 3 or 4 years old, and his mother has just brought in some laundry in a laundry basket. And in the laundry basket, there were some beautiful things that she had, her lady things, lace and satin, beautiful evening, nightgowns, this sort of thing. And in the remote, the child becomes fascinated by the, Chantilly lace and the beautiful satin, and he goes to touch the laundry in the laundry basket, and he's touching it and he's feeling it, and some incident takes place that becomes a trauma. Either the adults see what he's doing and they become disturbed by it, but there is an unbelievable trauma associated with this memory, and that is the day that the Frankenstein's monster gets created. That's the best way to describe it. This is the false persona, or the Frankenstein's monster, that Lindsey Graham creates in order to protect that child who has undergone this trauma, because the adults see what he's doing, they're traumatized, maybe he feels ashamed or dirty that he's done something wrong, he doesn't understand what he's done that's wrong, and so the child becomes internalized, holds on to this internal shame, and then constructs this Frankenstein's monster, which is a character that's going to protect the child. So in plain words, the function of the false persona for Lindsey Graham is like a Frankenstein's monster. And the function of that Frankenstein monster, the politician Lindsey Graham, is to protect the child, the authentic Lindsey Graham. Which brings us to the Frankenstein's monster. So when you meditate on this story of the Frankenstein's monster from Mary Shelley, it is based on an older story. And the older story is that of the golem. And the golem was a monster, supposedly, that was created by a rabbi, Rabbi Loeb, in Prague in the 15th century. And the function of the golem was to protect the Jewish people from being harassed by thugs that would come and terrorize the ghetto of Prague. And so the rabbi constructs a monster, like a Frankenstein's monster, that functions to scare off thugs, and consequently he protects the safety of the people living in the Jewish ghetto. And so it goes back to this idea of what is the function of a golem, what is the function of the Frankenstein monster, what is the function of what has sometimes been called spirit possession, or there are different types of possessions where somebody may feel that an energy form gets stuck on them. That's one form of possession. But the most common form of possession is what we construct with our own minds. And that's basically what this individual did. He created a monster that was going to protect his external self, just like the story of Rabbi Loeb creating the golem that's going to protect the people of Prague. So that's the shadow work that we find ourselves in right now, and that's the purpose of the story. Did it really happen, or is it an allegory, or is what's happening to Lindsey Graham with Twitter exploding and people talking about the NDAs, now they've got a lawyer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The point is this: what's happening to him and the deeper psychological issues about how Lindsey Graham found himself in this situation is something that to some extent we have all gone through. And this is something that Carl Jung has talked about in his writings when he talks about the European man or the American man who must construct this false persona in order to survive in a society that is fundamentally unhealthy. So now we find ourselves at this time in human history where we must confront the demons that we constructed in order to protect ourselves. We have to get it out. We have to resolve it. And some of these defensive energy patterns are visceral. If you're talking about something like complex PTSD, it does feel like a possession, in the sense that for the person who's doing the deep shadow work, you may feel that your chakras are stuck, or you may feel that your heart chakra is closed, particularly, or that you've been punched in the gut, for example, if a relationship ends. Those are all real experiences that create real traumas in the body. And this is why we say that complex PTSD is not just in your head, it's in your tissue, it's in the whole visceral body. So, which brings us to last night's remote, that this is a really important time for us to do the shadow work that has to do with victim bashing. And that means that a lot of the people that are going to be rising up in the coming days, a lot of them are very powerful women. We're going to really start seeing the women rising up. This is the time of the women. And how can we support women in general? And this is kind of especially a message to the men that watch this channel. How can they be good allies and advocates for women as women come into their power, rise up, and rise up in the forefront of leadership in this country and throughout the world? Because this is really hailing the time of the woman. So what can men do in order to be good allies to their sisters as they rise into these new positions of power? And what I saw in last night's remote is the importance of prayer, how important it is to pray for women, particularly women who have been victims of sexual assault, sexual violence, incest, domestic violence, domestic abuse, not just in the United States, throughout the world. And the blame and the shame that survivors carry that doesn't belong to them. It's really important that we as women be able to release that so that we can come into our authentic power and into our authentic selves and be the loving female leaders we were put on this earth to be, ultimately to make the world a better place. And I would also say that this is a really good time for the women folk to really be praying for men, particularly black men who are going through so much in this country. Somebody had sent me a message saying, wow, Whimsy, you did a remote view of you did a lot of remote views of what it's like to be black in America, and you had a complete collapse. You could barely function, and that's actually quite accurate. I did a couple remotes of being a black woman, being a slave. I did remotes of being a black man, and for me as an empath, I think it was the most traumatic, difficult assignment I was ever given. And it felt for me, having that experience, like somebody had taken a steel block and put it on top of me and expected me to function in the world normally. The fear of sensing the fear of others, the wound of being misunderstood, of being a nice person and everyone being afraid of me and everybody having preconceived ideas and constantly having to reassure people, and just the stress and fear and terror and the burden was what I took away from that remote. And so now is really a time where we are expelling demons of trauma. I guess that's just the best way to put it. And so I've definitely spent the week crying like a wounded animal, releasing all of this. Not just the trauma from my own past, but the trauma of everyone's past. We are not going to get past it until we understand that it wasn't our fault, that we were just children and deeply wounded children. You know, one of the charities I like to give to is the Hope for Pause. We give, I think, $50 a month to Hope for Pause. And when you see a rescue on Hope for Pause, you see this gentle man will find and rescue this animal that's just been tortured its whole life. And it's afraid of people, and particularly it's afraid of strong men because of the history of that animal. But what I like about that organization is that he gets where the animal is coming from, and he gets that through love and compassion, the trauma can be healed. And so to some extent we are all just like those animals. We have to view ourselves with compassion and grace, just like we do traumatized animals, and we need to pray for one another that we see underneath the trauma for the pure innocent people that we are, and lift ourselves out of this slavery mentality of shame and blame that doesn't belong to us. And I think that when we do that, and when we collectively pray for one another, we are really going to hail a remarkable revolution. But until we do that, until we give up this victim bashing, we will not have any. I don't think that the revolution, that we will really be successful until we bury these false beliefs. One of the prayers that I've been doing a lot for men, to pray for men, particularly because it's difficult to be a good man in this society, to be a strong man and to have to love and care about people who've been so severely traumatized. To see the women you love and care about be so traumatized, I think is very difficult for good men. So one of the prayers that I've been doing for the men and been playing it is from the Sikh tradition. It's called the Saupurk. It's recited by Ninjankar, and it's a mantra that just is a prayer to empower and heal men. So that's been one of the prayers that I've been doing during this time of shadow work. So I also want to give a thank you to the people who've been praying for me during this time, because it has been difficult for me. I have felt those prayers, and I'm very grateful to everyone who has kept the prayers going. So keep fighting the good fight, everyone. Also, I wanted to say that we did do our charity donations. I haven't figured out how to put it on this because I'm going to just directly upload it, but we did Black Lives Matter, $100. We did the Heifer Foundation, Charity Water, and a couple of others. I have to go to, I'll figure out how so you guys can all see the receipts. All right, thanks everyone. Love and light, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Good night.